Let us talk now about the rhythm. Once again, we're gonna talk about percussion, one of my favorite parts of the orchestra. And no, it's not because I'm black, okay? I mean, black people have a sense of rhythm for the most part, but I just love it. You know, it's good, it's fun. Now, percussion. We talked before about how every notes have their own rhythm and all this stuff. And if you have something like this is like 2 bars, and you hear like tuck tuck tuck. Those like tuck 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 are marking the beats. Now let's take, for example, let's write this sort of percussive groove with snares. You know, this is a basic rhythm. It's called 4 on the floor. It's when you put like one percussive hit on each one of the beats. If we want to make it a bit more spicy, we may add something in between. Now, these notes here, they are playing on the end part of our beat. Like when you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You may also count like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Those end are the, I would say, weaker parts of our beat, and their name is actually syncopated parts of our beat. It's these guys. You know, it's the weak part of our beat. The emphasis is on the 1, 2, 3, 4. But just because they're slightly weaker in the beat, it doesn't mean they're not as important. You know, like when you listen to electronic music, like usually that's sort of like that ducking effect puts a lot of stress and emphasis on the offbeats, on the syncopated notes, and they're so important. They add a lot. So if you want to make good use of them, I think you need to play with velocity and let the syncopated notes be at slightly lower velocities, like this. That's very nice. It's even nicer if you add variations. Maybe at the end of the first repetition and then the second, like this. You know? You know, you can get crazy like that. That gives a sense of forward motion to our rhythm here, which is pretty nice. You know, I dig it. You can also do it like this. You know, you can add more syncopation, but just going a bit crazy with like adding more notes to your rhythm, but you want them to be slightly less velocity. But the way you play with these velocities determines the actual groove of what you're writing. So you need to really play around with this stuff. And again, this is something you do to taste. It's not, there's no rules, honestly. Now, we came up with that. There's also another thing you can do, by the way. Like we've been using 16th notes for our rhythm here at 120 BPM. We can also use like smaller notes, like here. These guys, like this, that sort of roll is super fast notes, and they get that sort of roll effect because I did this thing with the velocity too. So it kind of increases. That's pretty nice to have. So, you know, just play around with stuff like that. Okay, we have our beautiful groove that we wrote on that snare ensemble. What beginners tend to do when they have a groove that they like is they copy paste it on everything. So the other percussive instrument we have on Nucleus is called Gran Cassa. You know, and if we were to copy paste the groove of the snares on the Gran Cassa, we had this. Which, I mean, it is powerful, but it's very, like, by itself it works, but if you put this in an orchestration, there's so much happening, especially because the Gran Cassa, it sounds so bulky, right? So just like before, we had like the high string play faster rhythms and the low string just playing the accents. We need to do the same exact thing here. We need to ask ourselves, okay, what are the notes in our groove that we really want to emphasize? And I like these ones. Those are the ones that I like. So I'm gonna play these notes very loudly on Gran Cassas. and then the other notes are gonna be on the snare. So the grandcasters are gonna be the big guys defining the notes in my groove that I want to be more emphasized, and the snares are gonna be there all the time. So together they get this. And this is less like bombastic, but still, I think it leaves more space for other things to happen around it. When you write for percussion instruments, there's going to be so many that you can use because the orchestral percussion are like such a big family, especially if you go to hybrid and trailer percussion, it gets crazy. But what you need to keep in mind is that the more bulky and bass heavy a percussion instrument is, the more sporadic you want to be with it. You want it to be on the moments where it actually matters, where it defines the rhythm, and the more like thin and sharp percussion that don't take so much space, you can use them like do crazy rhythms. That's the way I personally go about it. And by the way, you can change the groove dramatically if you change the accents, slash if you change the notes that are powerful or heavy on the rhythm. My accents are on the grandcasters and they're also on the snares, and if I do this, for example, it's gonna be a slightly different groove. You know, that's just the accents. And if I just play it with the syncopated subdivisions, which subdivision is the word for like these smaller notes in between the big ones, I get this. And again, this is just stuff that you can do to just play around with your percussive sections. A very cool thing to do is to just change things up every so and so. And the best way to do it is to change the accents. Because when you do that, then your mind is gonna start to think like, oh, okay, I changed the main features of this rhythm. Maybe I can change these small things here too as well. And those changes are gonna be way more measured than saying like, okay, I need to delete every part of this groove and start a whole new one, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think people sometimes either don't try enough or they try too hard. And I think the best way is something in the middle, like change things, but also preserve what came before and change things a little bit, just about enough, where people go like, this is still engaging, I like it. So you can do that a lot with percussion. And by the way, another thing that happens with percussive sample libraries and stuff is sometimes you may have access to loops, just audio files of percussion or something like that, where you can just press one note and then it plays the whole groove by itself. People are gonna tell you those are bad to use, but actually they're not. Loops are a very good thing to start to understand how to write for percussion. And you can also listen to one loop and try to recreate it yourself by like inputting one note by, one note at a time. The only thing is if you use loops, make sure to, if you can, add some variation on them. So changing loops slightly may help. And if you can't, then export the loop to audio and then cut the audio and change it yourself to make it a little bit more interesting every so and so. That's what I recommend. There's nothing wrong with using percussion loops, especially at the start, because not everybody has a sense for percussion at the start. So that's the way in which to mainly handle percussion. But there's a couple things that I still haven't mentioned. Those will be for the next videos.